Hey Squishies, back again, another vlog. This is Steven Universe, Season 5, Episodes 8 through 10, I think? It's the second half of the Steven Bomb, Back to the Kindergarten. Oh god, I'm blanking on all the names. Sadie Keller, and Kevin Party. So, like I said in the previous video, this is a great Steven Bomb. These are great episodes. The second half is just as good as the first. And it's doing that structural thing I was talking about. So, where every episode in the second half is a reflection of the corresponding episode in the first half. So, Back to the Kindergarten is a reflection of the first episode of the arc, Dewey Wins, where Steven, upset about losing someone he cared about, someone leaving, namely Connie, he throws himself into trying to fix a problem that wasn't necessarily anything to do with him, which is Dewey's election, and failed. But it brought him to some sense of understanding. Well, in the second half, that's the role Peridot is in. Peridot has, Lapis has just left. Peridot is in utter misery. She's even listening to country music, which that's like rock bottom. She is, just completely collapsed in on herself. Severely depressed. And, it's a situational depression rather than a clinical one, but it still is depression. It's more than just sadness. It's hopelessness, total lack of any energy, inability to get excited about things, no longer enjoys things she used to enjoy, a sense of futility. It's bad. But Steven and Amethyst help her. And they try to bring life to the kindergarten. And this is the problem, is, yes, a great way of dealing with despair is to find something you can accomplish, some task you can perform, some work you can do that, not just busy work, but something that has tangible results, some kind of positive outcome that you can create. Honestly, that is a far better treatment for despair than hope. Because as we see in this episode, sometimes you hope for things as a way to try to get out of despair, and then they don't happen, and then you get knocked back into it. But working on something you can actually accomplish, that can be really effective. The problem is, they bit off way more than they can chew. They tried to bring life to the lifeless, and you can't. You cannot revive something that is dead. But there's a whole Earth out there. And I think as much as Steven is talking to Peridot at the end of the episode, he's also talking to himself. Connie might never speak to him again. That is his fear. His fear is that he has lost her forever. And it is tragic and painful if he has. Just as the departure of Lapis is tragic and painful. Just as the scar that the kindergarten has left on the earth is tragic and painful. But there's a whole Earth out there. And I don't mean there's many fish in the sea. He can just swap in someone else for Connie. That's not how it works. What I mean is that even if that pain never heals. Which it might or might not. He's young. He is quite young. But even if it doesn't, even if it becomes a permanent scar, there is still a whole world out there to explore, things to do, accomplishments he can achieve, people that he can meet. Like, it's not that, you lost the girl, now swap in another girl, which is what people normally mean with that fish in the sea thing, which is really kind of gross because it implies that women are all interchangeable. No, what I mean is, yes, a bad thing has happened, but you can go and make good things happen. Might not be the same or even similar things, and it doesn't cause the bad thing to not have happened. That's not how it works, but you can have some good things still. Just because a bad thing happens doesn't mean there will never be any good things ever, is the point. I also like, they've talked about how the homeworld gems view the kindergartens before. I don't remember exactly when, but I know the phrase that Peridot used of formless energy becoming useful gems is a phrase we've heard before, possibly even something Peridot has said before she was, before she joined the Crystal Gems. But this time, for whatever reason, it sparked something in my brain, and I thought, in a sense, that's what our school system does. The American school system sucks. And part of the reason is that it was designed in the early 20th century to turn formless energy, aka the creative and emotional energy of children, into useful factory workers. That is what our educational system was created for, was to make people who could be slotted into industry. And there's still that tension. I was just the other day, I was with my brother and my nephew, and talking about colleges, because that's the age my nephew is at, where that's starting to be a thing. And my nephew brought up the difference between what he might want to do as a career and what he wants to learn. And my brother's response was basically, well, why would we pay $200,000 for something that's not going to produce why would we invest that on something that's not going to produce a return? Why are we going to spend that huge amount of money on something that isn't going to be what you do for a living and isn't going to bring in money? And he has a point, but that's the problem with higher education being so expensive, is that shouldn't be what education is for. It should not be training you to be a worker. That's job training. And frankly, that should be the responsibility of the employer to pay for. If they want people who know how to do X, they can bloody well pay for people to learn X. Education should be about learning the things you want to learn and becoming a better version of yourself. It should be about, opening your mind to the possibilities of the world, about learning science, history, art, literature, all these things that, enrich our experience of the world, that make us bigger and better people because, we have a greater understanding. This is not to say, that you can't be a good or great person without an education. Plenty of people with a lot of education are terrible people. The point I'm making is that it is a way in which to grow, and it should be seen as a way to grow as a person. Not as a way to slot yourself into a role in an office. But that's the system we've got. Instead of something which, like a farm, encourages growth and flowering, we have something which takes formless energy and turns it into useful gems. Which is to say, something which ends life instead of creating it. So that's my little rant about our educational system. Unfortunately, the reality of it is such that, like, my brother does have a point with our educational system as it is now. That is a valid question to ask. The correct answer, obviously, is to destroy capitalism, as it is to many questions. Unfortunately, it is a difficult answer to implement. So, the next episode, Sadie Keller. This is probably the best episode of the whole run. And speaking of the answer being to destroy capitalism, kudos on you, Steven Universe, for in the middle of this already excellent arc, you toss in a musical number with some very strong similarities to the main theme of the show, particularly once the chorus kicks in, we are the working dead, and we lurch for minimum wage. Like, that is, we are the crystal gems. That song, that is totally about how, just like with the kindergarten, you're taking formless energy and focusing it into something useful. All this creativity Sadie has that gets squeezed out of her and destroyed by pressures of having to work this dead-end minimum wage job. How many Sadies are out there? How many Sadies are out there that could produce music, art, the cure for cancer, whatever, if only they had a chance to do something other than pick up the napkins people carelessly drop. And again, it's a reflection of the first part. This is probably the weakest reflection out of all of them. It's a little bit of stretch to call this a reflection of Gemcation. What it has in common is a group of people who don't really understand the problem. The other pizza, Jenny's twin, I'm blanking on her name. Yeah, I can't remember the name of Jenny's twin. She would understand the problem. But the rest of them, they don't really work. They express themselves. Jenny works a little, but she's still the twin that gets to go off and have fun while the other one works hard. And I wish I could remember her name. That's, so it's a group of people who don't really understand the problem, trying to help a person who is in a rut. And so that's similar to Gemcation. Sadie is in the Steven role. But, other than that, it's not really a reflection. It mostly just, this episode is an opportunity to have that amazing song, which is now up there with the song from Mindful Education, and Strong, it's not quite to the level of Stronger Than You, but it's definitely up there now as one of my favorite Steven Universe songs. So yeah, that episode takes what was kind of pretty buried subtext in the, whole thing with the kindergarten, and just brings it out and makes it text. Dead-end jobs are stifling, and we need to free people up to escape them and be creative. And that's the exact opposite direction from where we as a culture are going right now. Anyway, the last episode, Kevin Party. This is a reflection of Raising the Barn? Raising the Barn. I remember last video, I could not remember the title of the episode. It was Raising the Barn. With Kevin in the Steven role. He is trying to help one member of a two-member couple whose relationship is ambiguously romantic but very emotionally intimate, and very important to both of them. Trying to help reconcile them, and in doing so, kind of helps drive them apart. Although in the case of Peridot and Lapis, I'm not sure there was a solution, you know? As we saw in the episode of the kindergarten, not all problems can be solved. I still think Lapis is going to be back. I don't know that she has a choice about getting caught up in the war. But point stands. This has a happier ending, though. Which is another running thing in the second half, is the first half, none of the episodes have the little iris down to a star and pop. They all end on kind of this suspended note. A sense of incompleteness, a sense of, we're not ending, we're just stopping here. Whereas in the second half, they all do come to a satisfying conclusion and have the we don't come out of them with a feeling of, okay, what now? And I think that's another way in which the two structures are reflections. The first half is the questions, and the second half is the answers. I'm totally stealing that concept off of Higurashi, which is about as different from Steven Universe as a show can be, but still. Questions and answers. And so here we get, you know, Steven trying various ridiculous things, but in the end, he confesses to... Well, no, in the end, Connie comes to him and says how she really feels, and he says how he really feels. And that connection works, because that connection works. And I'm running out of batteries, so one moment. Sorry about that. I thought I had enough to finish the episode without plugging it in, and I did not. I should have just plugged it in from the start. Anyway, one other thing I wanted to talk about is, so there's been a lot of Utena references in the show, most visibly around Pearl. But in this episode, the haircut they gave Connie is Anthony's haircut from that show. And noticeably, Anthony is drawn as, and there are lots of little hints that although her name is Japanese, she is, although actually her first name is Greek, she is Indian. And we've got the same, I mean, with Connie it's not hinted at. Connie is of Indian descent. And now they've given her the same haircut as Anthony. So there's always been this little thing in fans' minds of wondering, you know, you've got the one Indian character in a show that is mostly pretty white. Or in the case of Utena, Japanese, but it's, you know, the same thing of the that's the unmarked identity in the culture making the show. And then you've got this one person whose identity is marked as Indian. Now, Steven Universe is a bit more diverse than that. We've got some Hispanic characters and Black characters and Asian characters, but still, it's a, you know, the point still stands. It's a point of connection between Anthe and Connie, and now they've gone and signposted a much bigger one, giving her Anthe's haircut. Anthe's very, very distinctive, weirdly triangular haircut. And that's interesting, because a big part of what this episode is about, and this arc is about, is that Steven flung himself into this grand sacrifice to rescue his friends, including Connie. And arguably, especially Connie. And in the process, he put her through exactly what it was that he didn't want to go through, as he says himself. He couldn't bear to think of her being taken off into space, and then he did that to her. Because he was in this mindset of the savior, having to save people. And I mean, I've talked about this so many times in so many different things, but Utena is one of the strongest shows for making this point. Saviors are not good. Because a savior, and this is the difference between a savior and a helper, a savior is coming in, imposing their ideas of what you need saving from and what being saved looks like. It's an act of ego on the part of the savior. It's, I am going to do X, Y, and Z, and you will fawn over me, in gratitude. Which is exactly what Steven did. And it's how he expected Connie to respond. We saw that in the first episode. Oh, thank you, Steven. That little voice he does. A helper, by contrast, which is what he and Connie were to each other, a helper offers what they have available, what they are willing to do to the person in need of help, and lets the person in need of help decide what, if any of that, they want. It leaves the person who needs helping in charge. It's joining them as a team. It's saying, okay, I recognize that you have this problem. I will help you with this problem. What do you need? Okay, I can't give you that, but I can give you that. Does that work? Yes? Okay, great. I'll give you that. As opposed to, oh ho, allow me to ride in and rescue you with this. And so that's very much what Connie and Steven are saying to each other in this episode, is Steven recognizes that in trying to be her savior, he was ignoring her feelings and her wishes, and not being jam buds. And again, like I said, that's a huge theme of Utena, that people who try to save Anthe and that by trying to save Anthe, Utena just makes things worse for her. But if she helps Anthe to be able to save herself, helps Anthe by giving her what she needs to be able to break out of her own problems, that is an entirely different thing. That's what Anthe truly needs. And that's what Connie really needed, and that's what they now understand of each other. So I feel like that the use of the Anthe haircut is completely deliberate. I think that's about all I got, which, 20 plus minutes. This was, again, a great arc, and I really loved it, and I hope you all enjoyed my take on it. If you'd like to see more, like, subscribe, check out my Patreon, my website, other videos. All of those should be linked around me right now. And I'll see y'all next time. Bye.